Hello, and welcome to today's web discussion on using data to plan for supply chain continuity. This webinar is another forum of the MRO Problem Solvers, a collective of like-minded supply chain professionals looking to solve problems together and share use cases and best practices that will hopefully help us all along our journey. There we go. Today's presenter, our MRO problem solver for today is John Delligatti, SDI's Director of Digital Transformation. One of the pioneers of MRO supply chain data analytics and instrumental in the development of the Zeus technology platform and service offering, John drives innovation and improvement through automation and digital product development to ensure SDI's digital strategy is aligned with client and corporate goals. Defining and implementing multiple technology solutions across a number of agile teams, John leverages his passion, his creativity, and his experience in digital products and services to solve both conventional and complex business problems. With that, I'll turn it over to John. John?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Deb. Appreciate the kind words and appreciate everyone for joining us today. So let's dive right in. So first of all, the context of this is with COVID-19 pandemic going on, obviously everyone's supply chains are stressed. Right off the top, we're not experts in coronavirus or pandemics, but what we are experts in is supply chain. We have over 50 years of experience, and in particular, we excel at taking a look at spend analysis and turning it into actionable insights. So today we're going to talk to you about how to do that and how it can help you better prepare for future strains on the supply chain. So our framework for action here is analyze, assess, and forecast. Essentially, the current topic on top of mind is that we need more efficient supply chain analysis to prevent disruptions like the COVID-19 pandemic from hurting our supply chain. A great way to start is to look inward and analyze your spend data to paint a picture of yourself that you may not have seen before. The first way that you would start doing that is by pulling some data. Ideally, you'd have a few years of data, but let's start with at least 12 months. Say 12 to 36 months. 3 years is ideal. You're going to want to ensure that the data is standardized like you see on the screen, and you should end up with a report that looks something like that, with fields such as description, part number, manufacturer name, part number, etc. Now, from there, we want the ability to ask some questions, but without any sort of analysis, data is just data. So first, we're going to want to bucket spend into categories. This gives us a place to start to recognize trends beyond what we could see at just a cursory level. So if you take a look at what we have on the screen here, this dashboard would be a sort of a way to take a look at this data and view a picture of yourself in a way, like I said, that you may not have seen before. Now, what's interesting about this is you may look at this and say, oh, this is so complicated. How could my data turn into something like this? But in reality, with the right tools and the right people, it's not so difficult, and it provides you an interesting perspective on what you're currently doing and what your past trends have been. So one thing I'd like you to notice, along with the KPIs along the top, that'll react and let you know how you're performing based on certain filters, is the categorization of the spend on the bottom. That is that bucketing that we had talked about that will allow you to sort of see your supply chain based on commodities that'll help give you a better idea of what you're actually purchasing and turning that data into some insight. Now, once we do this, it'll allow you to ask some more specific questions. So the graph on the top left is an example. If you were to click safety spend and take a look at what you purchased, for your PPE. Well, who are my top PPE manufacturers? That's very important when you're talking about supply chain continuity because, as an example, if you need to purchase 3M products, where do you get those products? You can go direct, but there's also a number of distributors you can go to. And in situations like the ones we've run into with the coronavirus outbreak, it's really good to know who else has stuff if your main provider can't come through for you, because the people who know who to go to second, who to go to third, are the people that get stuff when the big guys run out. Second type of question along the same lines would be, who are my secondary, tertiary suppliers for janitorial products? If you take a look at the graph on the top right, JanSan is obviously top of mind right now with everything going on from toilet paper to hand sanitizer. If you knew who you could go to for backup or maybe a local supplier, they could become your saving grace. Or they could become your saving grace, or vice versa. If you have a site that's using a local mom and pop supplier, maybe you need to go to the big guns. Maybe you should take a look at those people who can really command significant volumes. So either way, this can turn into some actionable insights for you, and also it can help you line up with your strategy, which suppliers you have contracts with. Again, just allows you to ask these questions. You're only limited by the questions you ask and the data that you have. So within those categories, you can also take a look at your inventory. A lot of times, inventory may have critical spares labeled, but it's not necessarily reliable. So a great opportunity to label those critical spares or revisit your current labeling would be when you do a physical inventory. When was the last time you did one? When you did one, did you identify critical spares? And are you confident in that data? Plenty of times throughout our history, we've gone to a storeroom, take a look at a label, take a look at the part in the bin, not even close. Or even if they are close, it's not the same manufacturer name or part number, because over the years and years since the warehouse was created and labeled, the parts changed. These are things that significantly inhibit your ability to plan for future disturbances in your supply chain, because you don't know what you have. And knowing what you have is one of the key tenets to any of this. So once you've identified some critical spares, there's other opportunities within the data that you have to improve your inventory. So many companies look at inventory management from just one point of view, but effective inventory management systems look at all possible areas to cut costs. If you take a look at inventory data, you can see where you can consolidate slow-moving parts or high dollar value parts that haven't been used. This just little pie graph here speaks volumes. It's from a client of ours that it's their percentage of inventory value that had not been used in a year. So let's think about it that way. 72% of their inventory volume across all sites hadn't been used. And that doesn't count the redundancies where perhaps you could store it at a central location. So there's a lot of stuff sitting on the shelf there that's negatively impacting their financials. And if they were more agile, it would significantly benefit the organization. Additionally, as I mentioned, you can consider transferring excess items to another location where that item is utilized, or consider using a centralized distribution model if you have the business to support it. And you can also run certain metrics such as, the highest turners. Why is this particular item on the graph there on the bottom left being used at such a high rate? Is there an engineering problem with the machine? Is that expected? If it is, can we make sure we know that based on the data so we don't take any action? Again, it allows you to ask the questions. And finally, besides looking inward within ourselves and looking into the past, we can look forward and forecast, right? So you can take a look at your analysis of your spend profile and predict what you might use in the coming months, right? Stock items for plants are usually ordered based on min-max levels. The issue with the standard min-max solution is that without consistent review or a plan of attack at the very least, usually those levels are set at the beginning and they only get looked at when there's a problem. So it's usually an arbitrary number when the product is initially created. Usually the information used to create that is incomplete because it's created at the beginning of some project, when in reality now we have time series data, historical data that we can use to develop a replenishment forecast. So at SDI, we use IMS modeling, which essentially takes your previously forecasted data, runs it through an algorithm, and finds the line of best fit that best predicts your future inventory usage to help make sure you don't have any stockouts. And it's especially important with those critical spares, those things that keep your plant up and running. You can't have those go missing, whether we're in a pandemic or not. So that's why they're critical. So yeah, that being said, I appreciate you tuning in for my little bit of expertise on your supply chain data. And with that, Deb, I'd like to know if there's any questions from the field.
Yeah, good. Thanks, John. Let's see. The first question, thank you so much, John. That was great. The first question is, what data fields do you recommend? Is there a minimum or an ideal?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reality is a lot of the times you have to start with what you got, no matter what. So at the very minimum, you would want to pull a line level spend report. Knowing the softwares, we could tell you, in SAP, it's this report, et cetera. So we could help you get into the nitty gritty. But at the very minimum, you're going to want a manufacturer name, a part number, unit cost, spend, and then sort of expand it from there. The ideal is a line level purchase data. And what's interesting now with all the technology we have is if you do not have that, a lot of times companies like ourselves and our partners can take what you do have and enhance it and enrich it to get you to that point. So even if you feel like your data is not up to snuff, don't fret. We can work with almost anything.
Thanks, John. The next question is, what if my data is corrupt or incomplete?
So sort of along the same lines, I mean, corrupt could be an issue, right? Like if you had data from 2 years ago that was from a different system, now you upgraded to SAP or PeopleSoft or something like that, and the data is corrupt, you might want to throw that out if you don't have a way to uncorrupt it, if you will, because you don't want to skew your metrics with some crazy years that aren't actually reflective of your business. So in the beginning, I mentioned you want to pull 12 months as sort of a minimum, but ideally 24, 36 months. That might be something where I would just pull the data that I know is valid before I make any assumptions.
Excellent. How do you know which categories to assign a part to? Are there obvious categorizations or?
Well, it's great. It's a little bit ambiguous. So some things can be obvious, right? Electrical wire is electrical, but if I'm just if I'm thinking like a machine and I look at a description and it says sleeve bearing, right? Well, is it a sleeve for my shirt or is it a bearing for power transmission, right? So it's a little bit ambiguous. It takes expertise in the field, which is why it's difficult and it's why it can't be replicated by technology at this point without some heavy hitting AI, which we're looking at. But the point is that again, it takes some of that expertise, which we do possess here at SDI, and we'd be more than happy to help you with if you need it.
Awesome. Let's see. Another question, there's a question on critical spares. Can I identify critical spares by viewing the spend data?
Sure.
Question.
So not necessarily, right? Because a critical spare could be an item that you haven't used in 5 years, but you know what? When that part breaks, you need it. So it's a little bit dangerous to use just the spend data. You're really going to want to take a look at the site level. There should be someone needs to know, whether it's plant engineers, your staff within the plant. You need to sort of tackle that at a case by case basis, because if you don't, you're just asking for trouble down the line.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, time for one more question. How long does this typically take, this whole?
Sure. Well, it depends on you have working on it for you, right? If you have a sort of Excel wizard or someone who's good with that stuff, they could probably get you some insights, real good, actionable ones in a few days, maybe a week. But if you have the sort of tools that we have here at SDI with our Zeus platform, I mean, there's a backlog, but in reality, you can get a result in a couple of hours. Just what we looked at today at a cursory level. Now, it will take time to dive in to really choose the action items that should be top of mind. But to go from data to insights within the same day, no doubt.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Is there anything else that you wanted to add for the audience or anything?
I would just say, like you said, I am passionate about this stuff, and it's very important for helping us move forward in this new world, both of pandemics and of Industry 4.0, right? So if you have any questions or if you have any data you'd like us to take a look at, please reach out, and we'd be more than happy to speak with you.
Thank you. Just for the audience, this was another forum of MRO problem solvers. Our next event is a Fluke best practice webinar on how data in MRO inventory management can move your plants out of the reactive domain. That is on April 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and I did put the registration link in the chat window there. I want to thank all of you for joining us. This presentation is being recorded, so you can email me at sales@sdi.com, or if you have any additional questions for John, I can get those to him as well. Thank you very much and have a good day. And that's it. It's done.